Today is a very difficult and uncomfortable day for me personally, as well as for the current and former members of the executive residence White House staff who serve the presidency. As a federal employee with 25 years of White House service, 20 years in the usher's office, and the last 10 as the chief usher, I have as one of my primary duties the privacy of the first family. They live in a fishbowl, as everyone knows, and our office attempts to preserve the small amount of privacy they still have remaining. Therefore, it is very unusual and troublesome for me to be thrust forward to speak of the private area of the White House that is the home of our president and his family. The residence staff works in anonymity to serve the presidency to the best of our ability, while striving to maintain the confidentiality of the first family and their guests.
That was Gary Walters, White House head usher, his opening statement to the Senate Whitewater Committee. The committee was investigating missing Rose law firm files from Hillary Clinton's law practice in Arkansas. The hearing date was February 8, 1996. Now, nearly 30 years later, that hearing is back in the news. Why? Because it inspired something that didn't exist 3 decades ago, a streaming series on Netflix from Shondaland. The series is called The Residence, and even though it's fiction, it's a comic murder mystery. If you're a real-life White House history junkie, it's something you won't want to miss. How did a 1996 Senate hearing become a 2025 Netflix series? In this episode of C-SPAN's podcast, The Weekly, we'll find out. We'll ask the creator and showrunner of The Residence, Paul William Davies. Before we talk with Paul William Davies, let's set the scene with a few more clips from that 1996 Senate Whitewater hearing. Here again, White House head usher Gary Walters.
Chief usher of the White House has a staff of 88 persons who take care of the executive residence in its 3 primary duties. First, as the home of the president and his family. Secondly, as the office and a site for official and ceremonial events of the presidency. And thirdly, as a museum that's open to the public throughout the year.
Also testifying, Dennis Freemeyer. He was Gary Walters' assistant. Dennis Freemeyer was brought into this exchange with Deputy Majority Counsel Alice Fisher.
Mr. Walters, am I correct that the first family's private quarters are located on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the White House residence?
They're private quarters, that's correct.
Okay. I'd like to ask for a blueprint of the 3rd floor of the residence be put up on the Elmo. I believe you might have one in your packet there. Mr. Freemeyer, I'd like to ask you, what are the possible ways in which one could gain access to the 3rd floor of the White House residence?
There is a stairwell that runs from the basement all the way up to the 3rd floor. There's also 2 elevators that essentially run from the same place, from the basement to the 3rd floor. The other possibilities would be from outside that would require accessing the roof.
If someone is admitted to the 2nd floor of the residence, then they could take either the elevator or the stairs up to the 3rd floor?
There would be a total of 2 stairs that would connect the 2nd floor to the 3rd floor, as well as 2 elevators.
Assistant White House usher Dennis Freemeyer also had this exchange with Deputy Majority Counsel Alice Fisher.
Mr. Freemeyer, I would like to direct your attention again to the blueprint that's on the Elmo and ask you to look at the southwest corner to the room that's marked 319A.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I correct that that's the room that's commonly referred to as the book room?
Yes, it is.
And could you describe the possible entrances into this room?
There is an entrance from a hallway directly to the north. There is also an entrance from what's marked on this drawing as the corridor directly to the east.
In the main hallway, there's a door in between the main hallway and the book room. Is that an automatic closing door, or is that a door that generally stands open?
Most of the time that door is closed. I believe it does have a closer on it, but I'm not certain of that.
Okay. And Mr. Walters, do you know if there's an automatic closing on that door?
Yes, if I could, the diagram that I'm looking at has a partial coloration on half of the room, 319A, not the entire room. There are actually 2 doors from that center corridor, that open into that room. Both have automatic closers on them from the central corridor, but one of those doors is commonly blocked by material, file cabinets, various items have been in front of that door. It's the southernmost door of those two that is the accessible door, but as you indicated, they both have automatic closers on them.
Okay, that was 1996. Now we fast forward nearly 30 years, and we read from a March 20th, 2025 story in the Washington Post. This story begins in the most Washington way possible with watching C-SPAN. A few years ago, Shonda Rhimes and her producing partner Betsy Beers asked Paul William Davies, who wrote for Scandal and created For the People, to take a look at journalist Kate Anderson Brower's 2015 book about the lives of the White House's household staff. Intrigued by revelatory anecdotes from maids, butlers, and cooks who worked across administrations, Davies kept digging. He found himself unexpectedly mesmerized by a C-SPAN video of the White House chief usher testifying during the Clinton-era Whitewater hearings. He hadn't given much thought to the person in charge of running operations at the famous home, let alone all the secrets he might hold. Joining us now on C-SPAN's podcast, The Weekly, Paul William Davies. All right, Paul, how do you get from a 1996 clip of a Senate hearing to a 2025 Netflix series?
Well, I actually can't remember exactly what my search was for this, but I was reading Kate Brower's book, The Residents, and I was trying to kind of find a way into a show with the book because I thought the book was fascinating and had so many great anecdotes and such great history, but I didn't quite know what the through line was going to be in terms of kind of coming up with a show. And so I just started doing some of my own research, and I realized I wanted to see if I could, any of the staff, if they'd ever been interviewed. And I'd grown up on C-SPAN and watched a ton of C-SPAN and had actually looked at some C-SPAN stuff even before this. But I kind of stumbled just through searching onto this clip of the then chief usher and deputy usher testifying before this Senate committee, and I was just mesmerized by it. And I liked it for two reasons. One is because it gave me the idea of doing this as a murder mystery because of the way they were talking about all these doors and the third floor and the geography, and they even put up like a kind of floor plan that made me think of a clue board, and I was like, oh my God, I can do this as a murder mystery. And then I also liked it as kind of a framing device to have, testimony of some of the people that work in the White House be the way into the story, and that we'd have this kind of congressional investigation. That seemed to me like a fun way to kind of tell the story in an efficient and kind of propulsive way. And so the mechanics of it were interesting to me, as well as the kind of substantive epiphany of doing a mystery, and everything unfolded from there. And there's a lot of work from that point, but that was the catalyst for it.
Okay, so I've already learned from you, Paul. So you weren't going in, you were not watching this old clip with a series in mind. You actually were just watching it for fun, and then the idea for the series came to you from that. Do I have? Well,
I was kind of somewhere in between that. I was trying to think of a way that I could use the book as a series, and that was the kind of charge that I've been given from Shonda and Betsy and Shondaland, is like, is there something you can do with this for a series? But I really didn't know what it was. So it was kind of this, when I found this clip, it was part of my research to just kind of think, how do I get my head around this and figure out a way to tell a story out of this book, and that's what really lit the fire, so to speak. So was seeing this clip. So it was work, fun, but work. But I didn't know where it would go, and this clip really clarified it for me.
Gotcha. I have to ask you, because you did mention that you said you, if I heard you right, you grew up watching C-SPAN, or you've watched a lot of C-SPAN. Is that? Is that part of the?
That is true. Like I was a kid, like in high school, like Brian Lamb. Like I watched like the Iran-Contra hearings pretty religiously back in the '80s, and I just watched a lot of C-SPAN. I really did, and it's been kind of a part of my life. Not as much recently until this, but for this show, beyond this one clip, I watched a lot of C-SPAN videos of state dinners. My assistant and I watched hours and hours of state dinner arrivals and, the whole process, because we really wanted to make sure that we got all of the mechanics of everything right. And it was frankly the best way to be able to do that, to be able to actually visualize it. And, there are some clips of different tours of the kitchen, White House kitchen, and different parts of the White House that were really useful to it too, especially when we didn't have. Later, I had some access to some consultants, and I actually went to the White House a couple of times. But in the early days, I was really just, relying on stuff that I'd read, and C-SPAN filled in so much of the visuals for me, in addition to just having great information about how things worked.
So I have to tell you, as I watched the whole series, phenomenal, loved it. My wife and I watched it, and we had a great time with it. I came to it though, like you, as a political junkie, as a hearings junkie. I'm not a whodunit murder mystery, so my gimlet eyes were on the political history side of it, and I have to tell you, you completely nailed it. It just seemed, as an observer, as a watcher, the recreation of the White House and the history, and you had some real, in addition to just being a fun fictional story, you had some real, honest to goodness, LBJ, history in there, and it seemed like you were doing that on purpose. That you were weaving all that in. To be honest, is that right?
That's absolutely right. I mean, it was really important to me to, it's a fun show. Obviously, all of the murder and the mystery of it all is all made up and stuff. But where we could be authentic and be accurate, it was really important to me. Part of that comes out. I have a degree, our degree in history, and I care about it. And also, just I think it's more fun to watch stuff that way, especially because so much of the history is actually like totally bizarre and delightful. I mean, there's stuff that's, really moving, and, there's things in the show, we kind of cover a lot of range of tones, but just some of the fun stuff like the LBJ with the shower, or, the party crashers at the state dinner, and the third man, which is a real thing. And, the whole thing about the kangaroos, I mean, that's a riff on something else that happened during the state dinner with the pastry chef. But so many of these things came out of real White House history, and to me that made it all the more fun, and just I think it has that authenticity to it because it's born of something real. I
have to tell you, when you had the gate crashers in there, and I yelled at my wife, "He's doing the Salahi." What a cameo!
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so with the in the opening episodes, you had these magnificent creations, almost like computerized diagrams of the White House and the floors, and that continues through the series. I think that's probably the best depiction, at least I've ever seen, of the White House and models of it. Do you think that's right? That you've probably advanced our knowledge of at least the floors that anyone else has ever done.
I like to think so. We really put an extraordinary amount of effort into getting that right. And, there were obviously some compromises we had to make in terms of what we built and some of, what we showed, because, in some cases it's just not possible to do it. In other cases, just for production purposes. But we always, like, my kind of North Star is like, I always want to know, like, what is the real thing, and then if we have to deviate from it, like, why are we doing that? And not as opposed to just like, oh, hey, here's generally the third floor or the second floor. We know there's a pastry kitchen, but let's just put it here. And I totally get why people do that in whether it's the White House or other things. But for me and for this show, it was really important to try to get it all as right as possible, because we knew that people could look it up, and I just thought it was important to be fair. And also, just from the murder mystery side of it, this is kind of a locked house mystery. There's kind of this genre of locked room mystery. This is kind of a locked house mystery. And because I knew people could look it up, and I wanted it to be transparent. I wanted people to know, hey, this is real. These are the boundaries. This is the playing field. This is the game board, and I'm not cheating on anything. And so when I show you things and tell you things, like, you can trust this, and I'm not just going to have something appear in a place that you've never heard of before. That was really important to me, and so I again wanted to really get it right. And I do think it's unusually accurate. Among so many things that have been done in the White House, and I'm real proud of that.
Okay, you said I have two questions based on what you said. You said you were on site at the White House and you used political consultants during this. Can you talk a little bit about your visits and who you tapped into for their knowledge of the White House?
Sure. I went to the White House twice while we were making this. Once was with somebody who worked in the chief usher's office and who showed me around and especially places like that are really important for this show but haven't been shown as much in other White House related shows, like the basement and like the usher's office and some of the staircases, like the stuff where a lot of the staff works and operates, and that was really something that is particularly hard to access in terms of trying to visualize it and how do we build it. We had to kind of consolidate some things because those areas are kind of a labyrinth, but it was super helpful. And then I went a second time with the help of somebody who was in the social secretary's office and saw some of the same places, some different, and also outside, because there is, as you know, having watched the show, quite a bit of stuff that happens out on the grounds of the White House. And so really, again, getting that geography right and really understanding, how things looked and worked was really important to how we did this. And so, both those consultants in the social secretary's office and in the chief usher's office were really helpful in the access, but also, and much more importantly, just in being able to answer all kinds of questions about how did this work, or just lots of protocol things. With the state dinner and so forth. And then also just kind of like tonally, like what are these relationships like, and what is the dynamic between the social secretary and the chief usher's office, or among some of the staff, and what exactly does an engineer do? What exactly does a deputy usher do? What's the difference between a valet and an usher? Like there's things that are just there's no guidebook for it really. It's the people that work there and the institutional knowledge, and so understanding all of that to the extent there's still vast amounts that I obviously don't get because I haven't lived it as much as they have, but that was really helpful to me.
Was there anything amazing in all this research, any big eureka moments, say, my God, I had no idea this happened, or I can't believe this happened? Anything just gobsmacked you?
I think it's hard to say there was one thing. I think just the biggest thing, which is it's just like the scope of it, like the scope of the operation, I think is not, first of all, the scope of the house just structurally, I think is not totally clear to people, including myself, when you just kind of look at it. You're like, oh, it's a big house. I was there last week, not in the White House, but outside at the Hay Adams. And it always impresses with the size of it, but you have no idea kind of how layered it is, and that there are 6-7 floors in what appears to only be 3 floors, and like the mezzanines, and just like all of the things that are going on there, and just the physical scope of it is just amazing to me still. And then with that, all of the people that work there, and just the extent of the operation and the dedication of those folks. Like that to me was really a revelation. I don't know what I thought. I guess like most Americans, like you didn't really think that much of it. You think, oh, it's the White House, and I'm sure some people are doing, but just like the amount of people working there, and the diversity of jobs there, the amount of skill and knowledge and expertise and history in the folks that work there, and the size of the house is just something that really made a mark on me. It was something I really tried to honor in doing the show.
Paul, you mentioned Kate Anderson Brower. I do want to mention her because she has been on C-SPAN a couple times, and her book, The Residents Inside the Private World of the White House. Talk a little bit about her connection to the project, and you working with her and inspired by her, by Kate Brower, and so on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, she, the book, like I mentioned, was given to me by Shonda and Betsy, and they had optioned the book years before I got involved with it, and they'd asked me, what I thought I might be able to do with it, and I thought it was great. Kate did an amazing job, and there's so many interesting things in it, and so many different threads and stories and characters in it, and so I found myself just really fascinated by it, and then I just had to kind of find my own way to tell the story, which was admittedly a bit crazy and probably not anything Kate contemplated when she read the book. But she's been totally lovely. I've gotten to know her now, especially in the last year or so. She came out and visited the sets at one point with her family, and we talk quite a bit now. And she's a great person, and it's been helpful to me if I ever needed anything. And I think what I really appreciate is that she wrote this book, obviously hopeful that something would happen with it in terms of Hollywood, but didn't know what, and really has embraced my very kind of unique take on it. I don't think it's self-evident in reading that book that this is where you would end up, and she's really been lovely about that and supportive of it because it's a bit unorthodox, and I've really appreciated that. So we've had a great relationship.
All right, Paul, I have to ask you this. We've been talking about the White House and the great, accurate recreation of the White House for the Netflix series, The Residence. But I love that you said you watched hearings and the Senate hearings and Iran-Contra. I thought, and this is just as somebody who watches hearings for a living, that your recreation of hearings was spot on. Typically, we get from Hollywood, they walk through, the witnesses walk from the back into, it's dramatic. There's music underscoring the appearance, and it's this huge scene of drama. It struck me that I've never seen a Senate hearing or any congressional hearing as accurately as depicted, including a real-life senator, Al Franken, as a senator in the hearings. And I do want to I want to hear how you pulled that off. How spot on your depiction of congressional hearings were.
Well, no, I really appreciate that. It was really important to me, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. I mean, really, because I say this not being critical of anybody else's show or movie or anything, and everybody does things in their own way, and they often fit what they need to do in the way that they need to do it. But I as somebody who's watched a lot of this stuff over the years, I sometimes find myself when I watch hearings, like you do, I think just kind of like, wait, what? That doesn't seem like a real hearing, or that, and I really wanted to give it that feel. It was really important to me that the space looked right, and that the vibe felt like a real hearing, and that came out of years of watching these things and just the way I wanted to do it, what I wanted for this show. And there were certain things that I thought about and I talked about with the team, like famously The Godfather Part 2. I have always loved those hearings, the way they were shot, and there's other references, but I really wanted it to feel authentic, and I think I feel very proud of what we did with that, because that was an area that can go really off the rails, I think, for what I wanted to do, and I feel really good about how successful that was. And as for Senator Franken, he was incredible, just a really fun person to work with, and somebody who, when he came aboard, had lots of stuff to do, but I was like, if you are up for it, I'd love to write more for you, because if you've got Al Franken playing a senator, how delightful. And so I wrote even more for him after he was aboard on the show, and it was very satisfying when he first came onto the set, because we had built everything before he ever came to the studio, and that was a little nerve-wracking for me, because obviously he knows how these things look and work, and he was like, oh, this is great. He was really, really happy with it, really impressed, gave us a couple little thoughts just about really small prop things and stuff like that. But he felt really good about it. And that was a real great threshold moment for me, because I'm like, oh, if we can satisfy the real senator here, then we've probably done a pretty good job.
All right, before I get to my final question, one more thing on the hearings. You did one thing I've never seen before, and you didn't do something I've always seen before. We mentioned the soaring music that are always in other movies, other shows' hearings, which I having watched a lot of hearings at C-SPAN, there's never, ever any soaring music underneath a witness. So thank you for not doing that. But also thank you for doing something. Thank you for doing something I've never seen depicted by Hollywood, a closed hearing, a closed session of a hearing, which I was watching this and I said, my God, he has a closed session. That's phenomenal. So I really enjoyed that little detail in there.
Yeah. No, that was great. No, thank you. No, both those things. Yeah, it's funny. Like, we never had any music, almost any music at all during the hearings, and one of the only times we do have a little bit of a carryover, it is kind of as a joke. So you were very observant on all that, and I appreciate the scrutiny.
Great. All right. So my last question, Paul, the big picture, it's a combination of how commercially viable are political shows / what's your next project / is your next project involving politics or maybe even more C-SPAN archived footage of hearings by any chance?
That's in terms of how I don't know. I think the show is doing well, and I think people are really excited about it. I've heard lots of enthusiastic responses, so I hope that it keeps going that way, and that it feels viable as that kind of show. And in terms of the future, I'm not totally sure. We're going to see how this does, and I love this character of Cordelia Cupp, the detective, and would love to see her do other things. And her home base is the Metropolitan Police Department in the sense that she's kind of a consulting detective for them. She doesn't work for them, but she gets a lot of work out of them and has done other things in Washington. And I have always liked the idea that because it's Washington, because countries have obviously their embassies from all over the world there, that she's known all over the world, and people have access to her there, so that she often will go off and do something in wherever it is, and yet still kind of come back. So I would hope that we may be able to take her somewhere else, but also she does have roots in the Washington area, and there may be more to do there as well. So we'll have to see how people respond to her and to the show. But and as for the C-SPAN part of it, I mean, look, I'm going to be watching C-SPAN whether I'm working on this show or not. But so I'm hopeful that that more ideas come out of it.
Well, I'm sure you get story ideas all the time. May I suggest a story based on quorum calls? That would be a great.
There we go.
Great quorum calls in history.
I like it.
All right. Paul William Davies, this has been wonderful. The show again, The Residents, produced by Shondaland, now streaming on Netflix. I loved it. My wife loved it. Caitlin, who is in the room with me, loved it too, and just phenomenal. So thank you so much for joining us here on C-SPAN Radio's Podcast The Weekly.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
A huge thank you to Paul William Davies for joining us. Again, the series is called The Residents, produced by Shondaland, and now streaming on Netflix. We mentioned Kate Anderson Brower, her book, The Residents Inside the Private World of the White House. She appeared on C-SPAN's Q&A program 10 years ago this month, April 22nd, 2015.
When did one of the butlers or the maids or the housekeepers see a nude woman running around the White House living quarters and it wasn't anybody connected to the first family?
That was during the Kennedy administration, and Traffy's Bryant, who was the head electrician and also the dog keeper at the time, saw a lot of them saw some really strange things going on in the second and third floors of the White House, and they technically weren't supposed to wander up there when Mrs. Kennedy was out of town, and she often was going down to their farm near Middleburg, Virginia, and during the weekends she didn't like staying at the White House. And when that happened, the president kind of wanted the staff gone. He would ask for some food to be put aside and a pitcher of daiquiris left for him and his guests, and he would swim sometimes nude with the secretaries. One staffer told me that they found Dave Powers, who was a top advisor to President Kennedy, swimming in the pool with one of the secretaries naked. I mean, it was definitely, it's incredible because no one ever said it at the time, and that just goes to show that they kept all of this. I mean, they kept President Roosevelt's paralysis secret. They would wheel him into the state dining room and make sure that he was seated so that nobody else would know. Everyone else would come in afterwards. They would hide the wheelchair. I mean, they were very protective of these people, of the first families.
And here's an appearance by Kate Anderson Brower on C-SPAN's Book TV in May 2015.
The chief ushers are so important to the running of the White House that Jackie Kennedy called Chief Usher J.B. West the second most powerful man in Washington. Nancy Reagan named her dog after Rex Scouten, who was the chief usher, and had him buried, made sure he would be buried in Arlington, and it worked that out so that he could be buried in Arlington, which was unusual because he hadn't served in the military. So they really love the chief ushers.
A huge thank you to Paul William Davies for joining us. Again, the series is called The Residents, produced by Shondaland and now streaming on Netflix. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Weekly, and instead of our normal closing music, we'll play something else. From the opening scene of The Residence, it's the night of the Australian state dinner in the White House. Head usher A.B. Winter is lying dead in the game room on the 3rd floor. His body is discovered by the president's mother-in-law. And we hear this.